Hey guys, welcome back. I'm glad you enjoyed that video on wheeling basics. Yeah, it was a bit of a challenge to get all that information down in such a short time. I think 13.5 minutes, especially in a panel like this, can take you a better part of a day or longer to create. So hopefully it helps you out in starting your own metal shaping project. And again, thanks for all the great comments because that's led up to today's video. Before I get into creating a bead along the outside edge of this fender, in our last week's video when I talked about hammer and dolly techniques and planishing methods, we put up a picture of the R1 sports car that we built a long time ago. We had some people asking if they could see some more build videos of that car. Unfortunately, that car was built way before we started the YouTube channel and actually at a time when we used 35mm film to document what we were doing. I think in the early 2000s we got a digital camera and we took more pictures more often. But when we started that project, my dad and I, we had a 35mm and there weren't too many pictures in the early stages, unlike what we do now. You can find those pictures on our Facebook page, links down at the bottom. I'll tell you what I'll do. When all this snow melts away and the car show season starts back up, I'll get R1 out and I'll do a walk around video and show you how the SR-71 Blackbird and the late 60s muscle cars inspired the theme for that car. You know what? I'm just thinking, if I can get R2 down, we'll get both cars parked side by side and do a walk around video of both. And I'll show you how one design evolved into the second one. They're about 10 years apart. So you can see the progression from one to the other. Anyway, let's get the show on the road and start forming a bead around this outside edge of the fender. One normally wouldn't create a bead to shrink material. You think about it. You wheel up the mirror opposite of this one over here, you join them together and have two beads on top. It would look kind of strange, unless you wanted that. So in this case, this fender is more or less a piece of art, and I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes to show you how a bead will move material to a different place, allowing this outside edge to come down. Normally, when you're creating a floor pan or something, you want to put some beads into it, you would have to create some pre-stretch where the bead goes so that after you create the bead, the panel doesn't deform. And I'll show you that in the next video, how that happens or why that happens. Now in this case here, we're going to create a really big bead. One from one side, one from the other, probably go part of the way. From this end, we're going to use this bead roller with an arbitrary set of dies. I just left what was in here. It probably won't even look good. And we're going to create a profile in the back edge here that basically moves the material and allows that to come down. You're not really shrinking, you're just putting material somewhere else. On that side there, we use the tipping wheel, create a different style of bead, a lot more pretty than this one, and that'll allow that to come down. Because right now, that's not sitting right, and you can actually see that the outside edge is distorting the surface finish of this panel here. Once we're all done with the beads, we'll take and flatten them all out, and in the third video, I'll go ahead and use tuck shrinking to physically shrink the material down to where it needs to be. Okay, so I scribed a bit of a line. Let's see if we can clear that fence there. Oh, not bad. And applied a little bit of pressure and just rolling it through. There we go. So I'm going to stop it about there. There's no point going up all the way because we're going to be flattening all this out. Just going to tighten things down a little bit more, wheel it out, or bead it out, I should say. Like I said, normally you wouldn't be doing this to the outside edge, and you're only limited to the height of that bead. This looks kind of ridiculous, but let's see how this panel fits on the buck right now. Line things up. So I've clamped the panel to the buck, and you can see up and through here, this is shooting outward. While this area through here is now returned in a lot tighter than it was. Now we'll go to the tipping wheel and create a bead from the other direction. What I like to do is usually create a little center line on my upper wheel, just so I can align it with this line that I scribed on the lower panel. There, let's try that. I'm going to repeat that you're not actually shrinking the metal itself, you're just moving material to a different place. Because you can see this wavy edge here, that's extra material that has to go somewhere. That's good enough. Gonna give it one more shot. And there we go. Now, if you weren't looking at this side here, all this wavy edge, that really wouldn't look too bad. We can go fit this on the buck, see how it looks. If I had moved this out a little bit further, we wouldn't get so much material bunching up like that. So we can actually go to the English wheel, flatten this out, re-roll it a little closer to the edge. But I want to see what this looks like on the buck. Okay, there we go. See, like touching there, almost touching there. We don't have that area shrunk there, but you can see that that looks pretty trick. Okay, we've got a nice bead up here that basically tapers off to almost nothing over here. This has to be taken and rolled underneath, but that looks pretty cool. That's what I was saying about using a bead to your advantage, because you can then run it through the tipping wheel, create a similar indentation on this side, wheel up another piece, the mirror opposite of this side over here, and put your joint right here. So in other words, you'd be putting your joint just to the bottom edge of this bottom radius. And you'd have your two pieces joined and basically a complete front fender. Let's get this clamp back on the buck. If you plan your panel out in such a way that you know you don't have a tuck shrinker or kick shrinker or any way to shrink it, if you plan your panel out to create a feature somewhere that kind of helps you move material to a different location, you can use a bead to your advantage. Here, we haven't finished that, so it's causing some buckling through here. This looks silly down here, but that looks pretty good. And like I said, you can take and form up a second piece and make a joint on the other side right through here. In part 2 of this bead rolling series, we're gonna create some beads in the side panel. And I'll show you what happens when you don't pre-stretch and after you pre-stretch, what happens to the material and how it kind of behaves. Then in the third video, we'll flatten these beads out using the English wheel and use the stump as well as the tucking forks to create tucks and actually physically shrink the material down and fit the buck properly at that point. The kick shrinker won't give you the results you need, especially when you have that much material to shrink. There's always more than one way to shape a panel depending on the tools you have available. And I want to make it clear that in this case, we didn't actually shrink the metal itself. We just moved it around to a different location. And you can see it's almost on the buck right there. You can just hear that right there. It's sitting up because of this area through here. It's kind of forcing it out. If we ran this bead all the way down, it'd be sitting where I needed to sit. So there you go. I appreciate you guys watching. Please like, subscribe, and hit that little bell up there. It'll give you a heads up next time we have video coming out. Take care, guys.